Thanks for coming today. We're going to be talking about design principles. For the past couple lectures, we've been going through the software for Photoshop and Illustrator, but now we want to kind of delve into more conceptual things to help you actually get like great designs out there. So these principles are basically a guideline to help you as you start designing your app to make it look better, and also for the functionality to improve as well. Design matters. It's a really powerful statement, and it's true because design really does matter. Design is going to set your app apart from the sea of other apps in the App Store, and also it polishes your app so it looks good within this club. I think at the App Fair we had an award for best design, and that's a really good award to win because it stands out. Designing your app well will leave a positive mark on your user as well. If you look at your own smartphones, whatever apps you use, the ones that are well designed, you probably enjoy using them more. Maybe you might not consciously notice it, but it does kind of leave an impact. And the more you use your phone, I encourage you to kind of pay attention to what apps you have. The ones that are well designed probably are easier to use and they're aesthetically pleasing. So you might like them. And it also represents your client's company as well. So practically, we're designing for nonprofits and they have their own branding code. So when you're designing an app for them, you want to keep that in mind. You are representing an extension of their company using an app. So you want to design to represent them well. The first principle we want to talk about is hierarchy. Basically, hierarchy is how you can structure your content. If you're given a title and a paragraph and some caption text, you want to make sure you organize it in a way that's logical and clear for your user to understand. This way you can communicate what's most important as well, which is why we have these bold headlines on newspapers or magazines. And in user interface design, it also helps guide your user to different actions. If you have good hierarchy, and you know where to place the button or how large the button should be, then the user will also know where the button is and what's the next step. So here's a poster for a graphic dialogue, and I want to ask you guys, what's the first thing that stands out in this poster? Let's feel free to shout it out. Graphic dialogue. Exactly, yeah. Graphic dialogue stands out. It's huge. It takes up the whole space. And it's very bold, and the white and black contrast helps you see that first. And then right after that, you're probably guided to see that smaller text in the different locations. And if you look closely at that smaller text, you can see that the titles or the numbers 10, 14, 16, 12, those are bolded over the text that's underneath it. And so there's multiple layers of hierarchy going on here. You see the graphic dialogue first, then you see the smaller text, and then within that text, there's hierarchy there as well.
How can you put the upside down?
That's something you can do in Illustrator. You can kind of edit the text and play around with it and make it do crazy things.
A good example of hierarchy, if you see business cards, you've seen business cards in the whole of your life, right? And then you see the name is always the bolder one, the biggest one, and everything. So that is a clear example of how hierarchy is used. So for in a poster or in a video or anything, hierarchy is really important because you want to control your reader's attention, just like you're writing a book or something. So you want to control where their eyes are going, and then you follow their eyes. So usually when we practice hierarchy, we design something and we also see from the audience perspective. So we try to experiment which one should we put first, which one should we bold, which one should we make bigger, which word should we put color in it, so that we play around with people's attention. So that's what hierarchy is important for.
I have a question about okay, so here we have three different kinds of settings for what the type should look like, either really freaking big, or small and bold, or just small. Right? So how much is too much with different types? If you have, I can imagine if you have 6 or 7 different types of text, then that might be too much differentiation. How much is too much when you talk about?
I think it really depends on the content that you have and the medium that you're designing for as well. if you have multiple pieces of information, you should experiment with it, but also know like when to group things together or which is most important and what's secondary. And you want to keep it as, I guess, minimum as possible, but depending on like what you have for content. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a great question. I think your professors or basically probably your teachers say that in your presentation don't use more than 2 fonts or something, right? So you don't want to do it excessively. For me, I try to keep it between 2 types of font or probably like probably 3 sizes. I don't want to make like red, green, italic, bold, underline, or whatever. And it's just confusing, right? You want to give the information as minimal as possible, but as efficient as possible. Efficiency is so important in design. And we try to make people, people, when design is good, you don't realize it's actually design. It's so natural, it's so instinctive, that you don't exactly know, like you don't realize it's design. Even your chairs. Like it's so functional that you don't think that it's design, right? So that's the core key of design. Yep, that's it.
Fancy one.
Share the project.
This is just another example of hierarchy. If you look at it, you can see that the image is really bold. It takes up the majority of the composition. And then the title, Union Square Festival, is also bolded. Below that is slightly smaller text, which is the date. And then below that is smaller text for descriptions and such. And we'll get into this later, but you can kind of see how color works in this as well. The title and the image have similar colors, so you can kind of associate them and see them first, and they're bolded, so it adds to that. So when we're looking at user interface design, hierarchy also applies here. You might not be able to do what you saw with the graphic dialog poster in an app, but the principle is still there. At the very top, you see Get Started in a bigger text, and then below that are 4 different bullet points. So the context of this screen is basically like a Get Started screen. You want to instruct your user on what to do. And the way they arranged it was with iconography at the left, like that newspaper and the 2 A's, those are the icons. And then right next to them is text to describe what's going on. And within that, you can see that there's a bolded title and then descriptive text. So hierarchy works here to organize the content in a top to bottom format. So as you're reading it, you know, okay, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. And then even at the bottom, there's hierarchy there with the buttons. They arranged it so that there are 2 text blocks right there, and they're larger than the rest of the content above it. And then you can't really see it on there, but there's a slight bar to differentiate that section. So you kind of get the idea that these are buttons to go to the next step. Composition also goes hand in hand with hierarchy. They really interchange with one another. In user interface, this probably means guiding the user through the functionality of the app. Using composition correctly will help clear up that process, because if you put a button in a random location or you hide it somewhere, that's not really practicing good composition. You're confusing the user, and you're gonna make them displeased as they use the app. So for example, this is Facebook Paper. If you haven't used this already, you should really check it out because it's really neat, like some of the interactions that they have. Let's see. If you look at the screen on the left, this is a really good example of what you can do with composition, because as you're looking at this photo, they chose to make it like a full bleed photo. They wanted to show everything that the photo has to offer, so they took up the whole screen. If you compare this to Instagram, you know how Instagram, they just have that square for the photo, and then there's all these different like comments and buttons. That isn't using the composition as effectively because you have to squeeze more in that space. So here they chose to put the text and all the icons above the image and at the bottom. So it's not as invasive, and the image gets to really stand out. And then here's another example of hierarchy. The buttons are grouped together, the text is bolded to display a caption, and then the text underneath is like the date. The same rule applies here to the right. You can kind of see the composition working. They divided these cards to take up half of the composition, and then above is like information about the person's profile. You guys kind of see what's going on right here. Another example of composition and hierarchy together, this is the Quora app. And they wanted to display, the question that's being asked in the description in a logical manner. So you can see it working here. They have the tags at the top, and then the question is bolded and larger, and then the description of that question is underneath it in a smaller text. That's very, it's very logical. If you're looking at this website, you'd probably just read top to bottom, and you'd want to see the question first, and then what the description of that question is. And then if you look at the navigation bar at the bottom, that question button is right in the center, and it's differentiated by that gray color. That's like a composition choice. They wanted it to be directly in the center, so if you want to ask a question, it's right there in the middle. Right. Color. Color is a little bit tricky. My professor always says color is subjective, so if you're critiquing color, you can't really say like, oh, I don't like blue, because another person might like blue. But there are generally some good rules and tips to consider when you're choosing colors. Color is really important because it communicates various things to your user. For example, some people might associate blue with sadness, or some people associate yellow with happiness and joy, or green with envy, or red with anger. And on a button, the user might be like, okay, that's like an alert or something that I really need to pay attention to, and click. And then also like your client, if you're designing for a nonprofit, color really plays an important role in how you design your app. One tip to consider is just use color with intentionality. Like Brian said before, or Habib's question, how do you know how many different elements of hierarchy to choose? It depends on your content, but also you want to keep it to a minimum. You don't want to have a whole rainbow color spectrum on your entire app, because it might be a little bit too distracting or not appealing. This is just a quote about color. In visual experiences, harmony is something that is pleasing to the eye. It engages the viewer and it creates an inner sense of order, a balance in the visual experience. When something is not harmonious, it is either boring or chaotic. So in terms of user experience and user interface, color also plays a role in that, because you can engage the user by having a great color scheme, one that works together in a harmonious way. And that sounds really philosophical or something. It's not. It's just basically if your app looks good, if the colors work together, it adds to the whole experience. This is a basic color wheel. You guys are probably familiar with that. Let's kind of go into more detail about it. There are two ways that you can choose color schemes, or to help you choose color schemes. The first one is analogous colors. Basically, the colors that are next to each other on the wheel, they might go well together. So in this case, the greens and the yellows, you can kind of choose a different shade of each of them, and then put them together and see how they look. The next one is complementary colors, which are the colors that are opposite each other on the wheel. These kind of contrast and complement each other at the same time. So you kind of have to experiment with them and see how they work. Because green and red might not. It might look like Christmas, but green and purple might look better in this case. And you also want to pay attention to how color looks in the context of other colors. So for example, when we're talking about putting a red button, you wouldn't want to put the red button on an orange background, because actually the orange background is going to mute the red and make it less outstanding, as opposed to having a red button on a white background. This is really important when you're choosing your colors, and you'll probably notice it as you're experimenting. Some might work, some might not. Some resources to look at as you're choosing colors. Adobe Kuler, Kuler, is a great resource. I've used it multiple times. Basically, it's a collection of different color palettes that other people make, and ones that you can make as well. There's also an app on iPhone, I think. I don't know about Android, but basically you can take a picture of anything, and it takes colors from there, and it makes a color scheme or color palette for you. So it's been pretty helpful when I've designed websites and apps to kind of get inspiration as to what people are using for backgrounds and buttons and such. Here's an example of how you can make a color scheme in Adobe Kuler. And then this one, I've definitely pushed this on people a lot, but patterns, P-T-T-R-N-S, is such a great resource because it's a collection of different user interfaces that are well designed and really beautiful. And it's such a nice tool to have. It's free and it works well. You can zoom in on the interfaces and see, maybe there's a drop shadow on this text or something like that. And it's good inspiration for you to use and see what colors people are using.
Is this for like iOS, Android stuff, or is this just general design stuff?
It's actually for iOS, but if you Google like Android patterns, I think there are a lot of websites that kind of were spin-offs of this one for Android.
Yeah, the general idea is not about like iOS on Android, but general idea is like to get inspiration for the layout, because these patterns are existing apps, existing like top apps out there. So that's the general idea, is to get here and then to get inspired how the button allocation that works, which one is fit to your nonprofit, and that's why we always go to this website.
Cool.
Yep.
And if you want inspiration, nature is a great example. Just as you're walking on Common App, just look at the things around you. Even people's clothes, people at FBU dress so well, like they know how to match colors. So you can definitely take that into consideration when you're designing. Don't take things that people do. And then, okay, typography is super important.
So, how well do you guys know colors by now? What are the different types of colors? There are analogous, which is like side by side, and then what is it? The opposite. Complement. Yes, that's the opposite. So, I want to make an activity so that you guys won't fall asleep. Okay, this Sunday morning. Why don't you come up?
Okay.
How else can you you don't really realize how big is an impact of like color, okay? And we're going to play charades, and you're going to explain the color without explaining it to them at all.
Okay.
Okay? And you guys just come back. All right, ready? So you guys just shout out. Okay.
Red.
Red.
Okay.
Yeah. Yellow. This one.
Blue. Green.
White.
Oh, brown.
Mm-hmm. Try. Guess.
Purple?
Mm-hmm. Purple. It's harder. I don't know.
Lighter yellow.
Close.
White.
Gold?
Close.
Orange?
Orange.
Okay.
Okay.
Trying to
Thank
do
you
this
so
one.
much.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Damn.
You don't realize it. Like the first four is so easy. Like you're just like red and like happy yellow. But then when colors such as like brown, it doesn't associate with some feeling. It's harder to explain. But just like this is very simple practice just to showcase like how a simple emotion, just a simple gesture can actually represent a color. People always say like, oh, it's so hard to explain a color to a blind person because they've never seen it. But how simple is the activity? It showcases like how important is this color. That's why color really is powerful. Imagine McDonald's is blue, you won't eat there. Like if you imagine like, I don't know, what Popeyes is like purple. I can imagine, okay? Yeah, so just to let you know, like this is really important. I hope that's awesome, and we're gonna move on.
Yeah, everyone's good at guessing.
Yeah, I'm surprised. It's like we tried yesterday, and it's like, oh shit, this is actually cool. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Typography. Okay, typography. Bet you heard this word before. There are so many words for this: typeface, font, and like, yep. Typography is more important than people realize. It's such important. You see it every day in your letters, you type in, you're reading it. So typography is really important. It only comes like at the modern era, before people are writing with letters and stuff. So we now have computers. It's really important. There are different typefaces, and yeah, like hierarchy. it influences everything. It influences like how the app looks like. If you put like really inappropriate fonts or inappropriate typefaces in every in a different kind of setting, it will impact the whole thing. Just like color, it's sublime. Yeah, but it's cool. It's important. So first, difference between typeface and font. What's the difference? I learned this like while preparing for this. Typeface is actually the family, family Baskerville. If you see it in your computer, that's typeface. Font is the individual the individual family members. So like if Baskerville italic, like font size, so that's a font. But the family itself is Baskerville. So we're actually misusing the word font. Like we say, oh, that font looks nice. Oh, can you please use this font? Or blah blah blah. We're actually talking about typeface. We want oh, Helvetica is the awesomest typeface. Although, when people say that. So typeface is actually the correct term. So you guys come to lecture today, now you learn what's the appropriate term. So next time your friend oh, I like your font, and it's no, it's a typeface. I'm kidding. So, but people are using font a lot these days, because it's the general term. It's the easier term to say. But font is basically the exact. I read it online, so people use this analogy. It's a difference between song and MP3. People don't say oh, I like that MP3, but people say I like that song. So it's the same thing. MP3 is the font. Typeface is the song. You get it? Cool? Yeah, one thing to keep in mind. Yeah. Next. Yeah, and there's two main categories. It's serif and sans-serif. So if you guys don't know, serif is this little thing, little squiggle thing. That's called serif, like those small words. And sans-serif means there is no serif. Yeah, sans-serif. See, these fonts they have no N in it. So sans means there is none. So sans-serif basically there is no serif. And this is the two main category of fonts. And it's used in different kind of setting. So for serif, for example, serif is used in Times New Roman, Times. This is more classical, very corporate. If you see letters from big companies and everything, people tend to use serifs. And if you want to bring a corporate look, a very serious look, a professional look, serifs are really important. But for sans-serif, it's more modern. Sans-serif is actually developed after serif. So people are trying to oh, let's just cut this unnecessary little thing. And it comes to the modern field. Yep. And why should you care? It's so important to give this, because typeface is a message. When you think of Wall Street Journal, you see all with sans-serif, right? If you think of Wall Street Journal without sans-serif, you think it differently. You think oh, this magazines use a lot of sans-serif because they want to cater to younger people, But serif is more to corporate newspaper and stuff. But this is not a really rigid thing. Oh, newspaper should use serif and magazine should use sans-serif. People use it interchangeably, and it's up to you yourself to what kind of message you want to show to the audience. Designing is about sending a message. It's about telling people what you want them to hear. Yeah.
And you can also pair them together if you want. You can play around with that.
Yeah, a good combination is usually one serif and one sans-serif, because I'm not sure how it works in our head, but usually people have a serif headline and then a sans-serif sub-headline, or the other way around, and that works together with people's head. Yeah, if you go home now or something, if you see in a magazine or something, you check all these things. You check, oh, this is serif, oh, this is sans-serif. There's actually yesterday I was doing, I think ilovemyfont.com or something. You need to identify the serifs out of 100 fonts. I feel like a geek. But and then yeah, so that's important. Serif and sans-serif. Yep. Again, if you see this example, what is this? The big one. Sans-serif. Yes, correct. So there is no squiggly line, it's flat. If you see, it's so sans-serif are mostly really clean, sleek looking, very modern. They use typography is also different font weight. Font weight, if you're not familiar, is just basically the the weight of the font. Yeah, bold or regular or light. Yeah, and then we're going to move on to, is it grid?
Yes.
Yeah, so what is grid? Grid is basically this thing, this line thing. When you play with Photoshop and Illustrator, you really use this tool a lot. Grid is basically to make something really organized. Like, you know, your eyes are not dependable. It's so many pixels that you don't know whether it's straight or not. So you use this tool called Grid System, and in Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, and this will really carefully align all those things. It's very important that these things are aligned. Many people doesn't notice it. Many people like really don't really care like if there's a spacing or something. But then it's really like you don't realize it when it's like carefully aligned, but when it's not aligned, it's really apparent. And people are disturbed. When people saw your design, you don't want people to notice all these little things. You know, when you want to make a presentation, you don't want a typo to be there. It's the same thing. When you design something, you don't want something to be misaligned. That's a very like taboo, unless it's what you want to do. Again, send a message. Yep.
Yeah, it's an example without the grid. Yeah, pretty much all you just said is on the what happened.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, when we're talking about hierarchy and composition, like the grids will really hammer this in. They just bring order, like Brian said. They're really useful in InDesign if you're not familiar with that software. InDesign is meant for print publications, so grids really help. And you can use them in Photoshop. I don't know so much as Illustrator, but we're going to talk about something that's kind of like substitution for the actual like grid tool. And you can use those to organize your content. So here's an example. Again, we're going to look at the graphic dialog poster. It's a really good one. But you can see how everything is aligned to a certain column layout, and that really helps structure the content. But yet, it's still like kind of chaotic when you look at it, which is a really interesting like visual kind of like trick because it's structured, but it doesn't feel structured at the same time. So in user interface, user experience design, you might not like necessarily need a grid tool, but you can definitely conceptualize it. So if you're going to be organizing your content, try and align it to like one like column, I guess, and have it all like in order, and then just play around with that. You can conceptualize a line that you can basically align your objects to.
There's a very nice practice to see how grid is there in our life. One day I was like actually buying Starbucks cup, like the Starbucks thing, the cup, I think so. Yeah. Next time you actually buy a Starbucks cup, you just like use a pen and try to trace like the boxes or like the logo and like just make a straight line. Because I was bored at that day, I don't know why. And I make a straight line out of the top part of the logo, the bottom part of the logo, and like the verticals. You can try it yourself, and you'll be surprised that everything is gridded. Every design, like out there in the billboard or something, it's well structured. You don't realize it, but if you actually take notice of it, it's designed to be like that. It's not just people putting boxes together. It's carefully aligned. Each of the spacing is so important that, again, it makes you not realize that it's designed.
Exactly.
Yep.
Alright, so a tool that you can use in Photoshop or Illustrator are guides. They're basically lines that you can drag out and place anywhere, and that can help you create like a makeshift grid system. I can kind of like demonstrate really quickly how you can use it. If you're in Photoshop and you have your file open, you want to make sure you go to View up here and click on Rulers. You can see that these like rulers over here show up. And you can click on them and then drag your mouse and it drags out these guides. And when you let go, it just leaves them right there. So as you're designing your applications, you want to try using these because it helps you see whether things are aligned properly, but also you can manipulate your grid system and kind of like create different ways of laying out your content.
Yeah, in Photoshop, Illustrator, they're smart, so they can make it like snap to the grids. So basically, when you make these grids, when you move the text box, when you move the pictures, it actually snaps to that. So you don't really need to like go pixel by pixel. But yeah, they help you with that. That's why we really encourage the use of these grids.
That's actually fun.
Yeah, I have an activity.
What's the difference between grids and guides? Or grids is a concept, and then guides are basically a Photoshop tool
Song and MP.
or something.
Well, for grids, like in InDesign, it's an actual tool that helps you like create a structure that you can use. But guides are kind of more sporadic or like spontaneous. Like if you want a line to see where things are aligned to, you can drag out a guide. But they, like for example, in InDesign, you can be like, I want 6 columns and 4 rows, and it makes them for you. But the guides are kind of like, oh, I just want to see if this is a line, so I'll drag out one here and drag out one there. Does that make sense?
So
Yeah, no.
yeah, usually you start with the grid, and then when individual stuff, you try to use that. So you click the ruler and drag. So that's the guide. Basically, grids are just a bunch of heads.